All right, good morning, everyone. It's now 9:31, and I'd like to call the March 11th, 2025 meeting of the STP Project Selection Committee to order. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, please be sure to complete the sign-in sheet out in the hallway before you leave. This meeting is being broadcast on Zoom and is being recorded. So please remember, in order for those online to hear us, we need to use our microphones. You can just press the button, green light comes on. Press it again to turn it off. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless you're called upon to speak. And when appropriate later in the agenda, I will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box. With that, let's start today with self-introductions of the members here at the table. I'm Kama Dobbs, Chair of the committee representing CMAP, and to my left.
Grant Davis with CDOT.
Ann Zhang with CDOT.
Jeff Shriver, CDOT.
Got it, Terry.
Heather Mullins, Regional Transportation Authority.
Mark Kukler, Village President of LaGrange and Council of Mayors.
Tara Orban, sitting in for Sis Killen, representing counties.
Thank you. We do have the necessary quorum of voting members present today. Before we jump into our first item, I did want to welcome our new member of the committee, Ann Zhang, who is the Deputy Commissioner and Acting Managing Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Engineering for CDOT, replacing Dan Burt. Ann, did you want to say anything by way of introduction? Don't feel pressure to. Just optional.
Thank you. Look forward to working with everyone here.
All right. Well, welcome. So our first item today is agenda changes and announcements. Staff has no agenda changes or additional announcements at this time. Does any member of the committee wish to propose any agenda changes or make any announcements? All right, seeing none, let's move on to approval of minutes. We have before us the draft minutes of the August 28th, 2024 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to that draft? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So move, Mayor Rockingham.
And a second?
Second.
All right. Any comments? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Moving on to our active program management reports, we have John Hodsma to provide highlights today.
Good morning, members. As Kim said, my name's John Hodsma. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a program analyst on the federal funding team. I also oversee the active program management here with our funding sources. So from here on, I'm going to be giving these reports at future meetings. So beginning with the shared fund active program management report, there's one project that's used shared funds in federal fiscal year 2025 so far, and that's the Elmhurst Bicycle and Pedestrian Overpass Project, and that used $63,414 for engineering. And there are 3 other projects that are also in the active program that are all looking to be on the April letting and would use up the entire 2025 STP shared fund mark, and that includes the LaSalle Street Bridge, Sullivan Road, and North Aurora Road project. The rest of the shared fund program projects are all using planned use of redistribution and are continuing to progress towards authorizations. Notably, the Randall Road at Illinois 72 project is the first shared fund project anticipated to use redistribution, which is also on track for the April letting. So April should be a big month for the shared fund. And since the beginning of the new fiscal year, staff has approved 2 cost increases and conditionally approved 1 construction cost increase in federal fiscal year 2025. That first cost increase was for the Prairie Street Improvement Project, which reached a 75% expenditure threshold required for approval of post-obligation cost increases. So an additional $1,718,377 was approved. And secondly, an additional $4,800,000 for CDOT's LaSalle Street Bridge project was requested and approved by staff. And then the last request, the Illinois 59 bicycle and pedestrian overpass in Streamwood, request an additional $3,297,750, and that was conditionally approved by staff. And what conditional approval means is that because it's post obligation, it's hit its letting. That means IDOT is going to wait a while to seek additional federal authorization from FHWA, which typically doesn't happen until after all of the already obligated amount of funding is expended. So when 75% of the already obligated funds have been expended, we'll go ahead and add the conditionally approved increases to the CMAP tip. And if it doesn't happen by the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, that project will have to make another request for conditional approval in the new fiscal year. Turning now to the contingency program status report, there was one project staff moved to the contingency list. CDOT's Grand Ave project, as its letting date, moved from June 2025 to March 2026 and could no longer be programmed using planned use of redistribution. Staff is closely monitoring the rest of the projects and will elevate them to active program if they reach appropriate readiness. But at this point, there does not seem to be any projects that are at that level. So with that, that concludes the shared fund program report. Happy to answer questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for John on the status of the shared fund projects? All right. Moving on to the active program management, regional accounting update. Sorry, go ahead, John.
All right, so yes, the accounting summary has been updated through February. And so far in federal fiscal year 2025, the region has obligated $57,588,961 in STP funds. Between the 11 councils and CDOT, only Lake Council and DuPage Council have not met their obligation deadline extension amounts that must be obligated by March 31st. So that's a few weeks from now. Lake has about 4.8 million, and DuPage has about $182,000 remaining in obligation deadline extensions to use. If those if not obligated prior to March 31st, those balances will be transferred to the redistribution fund. So we'll have an update about those amounts at the April meeting. As I mentioned earlier, the shared fund mark should be used up in April, and we'll be drawing from the redistribution fund the remainder of the year. At the moment, the shared fund is planning to use 30.7 million of redistribution, which doesn't include the one conditionally approved cost increase I mentioned earlier. Central Council and Kane-Kendall Council use their entire mark and will also be using redistribution for the remainder of the federal fiscal year. North Central Council is nearing using its entire mark and has about 952,000 remaining before it starts to use redistribution. And CDOT put in a transfer request for their State Lake project that is in progress and will use, once that fully processed, it'll use its entire fund, and it'll also start drawing from redistribution. If all programs use what is programmed for redistribution, the balance would be reduced from 179 million to 29 million by the end of the fiscal year. So that'd be substantial progress. But we'll see if that happens as we progress into the spring. We'll have a better sense of projects that will be on track to actually use the redistribution funding that they currently say they are in federal fiscal year 2025, since there are some critical deadline points or milestones that will be approaching, notably the May 16th pre-final plan submittal due date, which is the deadline for the November letting, and that's the last letting where projects can be authorized in federal fiscal year 2025. So with that, that concludes the accounting report. Again, happy to answer questions if there are any.
Are there any questions for John regarding the accounting?
Quick, you said the lake was, 4 million? Would you,
Yeah, Lake had 4.8 million to use before March 31st. Now, if they don't use that, they can shift those projects, shift the program around to make sure those projects still get implemented and put other projects onto the redistribution list. So while it would be nice if they could reach that, it's not going to delay any projects that are in the Lake program.
thank you.
And just, we're now, what, 3 cycles into this regional accounting process here, and it's exciting to see that folks are really starting to reach their marks each year and starting to dip into that redistribution balance. So I know, we went gung ho at the beginning and COVID slowed us down a little bit, but it's good to see that we're utilizing those federal funds pretty aggressively again. So thank you to all of our implementers for that. All right, thank you, John. Next up on the agenda, Doug Ferguson is going to give us a summary of the applications that we received during the call for projects that just closed at the end of last year and talk about the next steps for program development.
Good morning. Since your last meeting, we held the call for projects. It opened in October and closed December 20th. And I'm going to give you an overview of what we received. Next 2 slides. So in total, we received 37 unique project applications requesting STP shared fund. 13 of these projects also request, oh, sorry. I got my slides all messed up. Double-sided printing. In total, we received 88 applications. These applications have a combined total cost of $7.68 billion and are requesting a total of over $1 billion in federal from CMAQ carbon reduction, STP, and TAP funds. More than 20 applications requested consideration under multiple fund sources, which is why if you add up these totals for each of the programs, there's more than 88 applications. As in past cycles, the CMAQ program is the most popular, but of course it has the largest amount of funding available to program. Next slide. So we received 37 unique applications for the STP program. 13 of these projects also requested additional funding from CMAQ and or TAP. And the applications have a combined total cost for all phases and fund sources for over $1.3 billion. They are requesting a total of $442 million, which includes $440,000 in requested transportation development credits. These 37 projects fall within the boundaries of 30 different municipalities and all 7 counties, with 4 projects located in more than 1 municipality, and 5 are located within our highest need cohort 4 communities. So at that point, I'm going to pause here. Any questions on the applications that were received? All right. Next slide. 37 projects were from 29 unique sponsors, with the majority of applications from suburban municipal sponsors, followed by the transit agencies, the city of Chicago, and the counties. Next slide. As we've seen in the past, the location of the projects is split fairly evenly between suburban Cook County and the Collier counties, with 6 projects located solely in Chicago. 1 project is being considered region-wide because it has elements in Chicago, suburban Cook, and 3 of the Collier counties. And that would be PACE's TSP project. Digging a little bit deeper into the spread of the suburban project locations, we'll see that the projects are located in 5 of the Collier counties and all but North Central Council within Cook. Next slide. Uh, This slide details the distribution of applications across the different project types. Road reconstruction is again the most frequent application type with 17 applications. Like our last cycle, we received at least one application for each project type. You'll notice that these counts also add up to way more than 37 applications, and this is because many applications requested consideration under more than one project type. Next slide. Shifting now to the funding request, it is probably no surprise that the majority of requested funds is for construction and implementation, but the funds were requested for all phases except for there were no phase one exemption requests this round. Next slide. The funding requests were spread across all 5 fiscal years shown here. You can see the requests for engineering funding tended to be in the early years, but construction is pretty spread out across all the fiscal years. Majority of it is in the requested construction funds are actually in the first 3 years of the program. So as we are looking at all these applications, we're evaluating them. We hope to have draft scores within the next couple of weeks and then a staff recommendation for your consideration at the April meeting. But before I take any other additional questions, next slide. For those that were at the CMAQ, CRP and TAP Project Selection Committee last week, we talked about the committee and some adjustments to the scoring of those projects due to changing federal policies and the removal of USDOT's ETC tool that was part of the scoring for those projects. At this time, we don't think that there's any need to make any changes for the STP shared fund, but we're curious if there are elements of the selection or the program development process that you might be concerned about in light of the current climate that we're in. With that, willing to take any questions on the materials presented or the development of the program.
Thanks for that, Doug. Are there any questions about the summary first before we kind of delve into anything deeper? Okay. Then I think, what Doug stated, that we've made some adjustments to CMAQ and TAP just as a result of one of the assessment tools being eliminated with the change in administration. We're not recommending making any changes in the shared fund methodology at this time, but are actually curious if there's anything that in that methodology that gives anyone here any concern, anything that staff should be watching or considering developing alternatives as we move through here to having a recommended program in April. So go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. So at the CMAQ and TAP committee, it was discussed, the ETC tool is a tool that was removed by the federal government. So it can no longer be used as one of the factors in scoring those applications. Now, just for clarification, for the STP shared fund, there is no such tool that's been taken away.
That's correct.
Are there components of the tabulation for the scores, are any of them vulnerable? Do you have your eye on any that may be susceptible?
There's a couple of them that, not from like the information disappearing or anything along those lines of the tool disappearing, but there are a couple of like our inclusive growth score it could raise some red flags because of its looking at persons of color under the poverty line that are utilizing our transportation system. So that's one that we've flagged as a potential, but we would like to proceed with using it. It was part of the scoring that we proposed back in the fall or I should say late summer. And we don't think there's a reason at this point in time. There's not been enough guidance from USDOT on what we're supposed to do. There's a couple of executive orders out there, but we're waiting on guidance on this. And we could be waiting on guidance for the next 4 years from USDOT. So we're not going to do that.
Thank you, Doug. But even that metric is just one facet of the project, which is STP
yes.
eligible.
It's
Right.
it's 10 points of the total project score. So, I mean, it does factor in, but it's not the sole determinant of how we're deciding to program funds.
Thank you.
Other questions or things that staff should be keeping an eye on, in your opinions? No? We will. We keep talking about this entire situation as a bit of a roller coaster ride. We all have been on these rides before, enjoyed them some, but this one's pretty extreme. So we're hanging on and, doing the best we can to keep the processes that are important to this region moving forward. So. All right. Well,
My only comment would be this, like, preparing to manage risk. That, I mean, I know you guys are on top of that, but like, if something gets thrown out, like having a backup plan of how to move forward and just trying to game plan that out, which I realize is very difficult right now, but
Yeah, I mean, I think from the standpoint of program development, we're fully programmed, as we can see on our status reports, through 2028 for this program. So if something happened to halt our ability to select more projects, we have some time to react to that because it's the out years. As far as, the funding for existing projects, I think, we have to be reactive. I mean, we're talking about ways to leverage state funds or local funds to do some things if federal funding would be yanked, for lack of a better word. But, I think that at this point, we're getting a lot of support from the state to continue moving projects forward and, keeping in mind that all of the funding agreements are agreements between the project sponsor and the state of Illinois. And then it's the state that actually has the agreements with the federal government. So all indications from the state are that they are honoring the agreements that are in place. So, not to say that we don't have some back of the envelope calculations going on, but, we'd rather not come up with 300 scenarios when maybe nothing's going to happen. So, but definitely aware of the risk on all of these major projects. Other thoughts or questions? All right, thank you, Doug. Next on our agenda is other business. Is there any other business for the good of the committee this morning? All right, seeing none. Public comment. This is an opportunity for comments from members of the audience. We did not receive any written comment ahead of the meeting. Is there anyone in the room that wishes to make a comment? Doesn't look like George wants to make a comment. Anybody online that would like to make a comment today? If so, raise your hand or go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce. Going once, going twice. All right, let the record show that there was no public comment today. So our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 3rd, only 3 weeks away from today. And at that meeting, staff will be bringing a recommended program of projects for your consideration for release for 30 days of public comment. So that is an exciting action item coming at that meeting. If there's no additional business, thank you everybody for making the trek down here for a short meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. All right, all those in favor? All right, thank you. This meeting stands adjourned at 9:55.